Okay, next we're going to talk about where you can get the money to double close on a house that you're going to wholesale. Now, in wholesaling, you basically have two ways that you can make money on a house, okay? Number one, you can assign the house to another buyer, or two, you can double close on the house. Now let me break those down. To assign the house, you get a contract between yourself and the seller of the property, and then you assign that property to another buyer. So basically, your name comes off of that contract, and your buyer's name goes onto the contract, and then that contract gets closed on with a different buyer, and you collect a fee from that buyer for allowing them to take over that contract. Okay, that's what an assignment is. An assignment is simple. You don't need to bring any money to closing for an assignment. You need two pieces of paper: a purchase and sale agreement between you and the seller, and an assignment agreement between you and the buyer. All right, assignment is easy. You don't need any money for that. Okay, a double closing is where you have to bring money to the closing table. And a double closing is two purchase and sale agreements. You got one purchase and sale agreement between you and the seller. You have a second purchase and sale agreement between you and the buyer, and you're making the money that's the difference between those two contracts, $50,000 and $60,000. You make 10. Okay, that's a double closing. Now, the reason you have to bring money to the closing table on a double closing is you actually are going on title for that first purchase. Okay, and to do so, you have to take over ownership of the property, and by process, you have to buy that property. So what a lot of people, know is that you have to have money in a checking account or an IRA account where you can literally write a check for that first property and then sell it to the buyer. Now, not everybody has the money to double close on a property, to be able to write a check and buy the house and sell the house on the same day. A lot of people don't have that, or a lot of people that do have the money, they don't want to put it up at risk. So what do you do? Well, most people have heard of something called transactional funding. All right, transactional funding comes in the form of a very short period loan from a transactional lender. And this lender puts up their money. They allow you to buy the house with their money, and then you sell the house in the double closing to the buyer. You still make the difference between the two contracts, but with transactional funding, you have to basically pay, to use that money. And it can be kind of substantial sometimes. You can be paying, $1,000 in points, and then, some percentage too. So, I mean, you can pay 10 to 15% just to a transactional lender to allow you to double close on a property. That's not necessarily bad. And to find transactional money, just do a Google search in your market. If you're in Atlanta, type in, Atlanta transactional funding, or if you're in Cincinnati, type in Cincinnati transactional funding. You're going to find lenders that specialize in back-to-back closing and funding those kinds of closings. Now, if you have the right closing attorney and the right contracts, you can double close on houses without having to bring any of your own money into the closing, or without even having to use transactional funding. And here's the way it works. You have your A to B contract between you and the seller. You have your B to C contract between you and the buyer. In your B to C contract, you have to have wording that says the buyer is okay with you using their money to first close on the A to B closing. Okay? So you're using your end buyer's money to fund your purchase. Okay? And then you were going to sell that house back to the end buyer. I know that sounds kind of complicated, but it all hinges on having a very savvy, very capable and professional closing attorney that understands these kinds of closings. Okay? Now, This lesson is about how to find the money to double close. And the answer to that is, if you assign a contract, you don't need the money. If you double close on a property, you either have to use transactional funding, and you can find that just by a Google search in your market, transactional funding in Cincinnati, Ohio, or if you have the right contracts and the right closing attorney, you can close without having to use any of your money. In upcoming lessons, I'm going to tell you how to go about finding your closing attorney so you can fund these deals using your buyer's money, and it won't cost you a dime to double close. Okay? Pretty cool stuff. So, moving on to the next lesson.